We are live. Yes, we are. That's where we are.
So,
Best album of the 80s. That's what I always say to Ronnie. Drives her crazy.
my dad was a narcissist.
My-
Would you say your dad was a narcissist?
I don't know, actually. We're going to find that out. Probably Steven is going to be able to tell us better than I would.
Yeah.
He has better definitions. He's read more books than I've read. And we're getting into that on
A Wonderful Chaos.
Wow. Steven Palmer is in the house.
You say his name like he's a celebrity.
He is a celebrity. Steven Palmer is sort of, I waited years to write a book.
Yeah.
And I waited years because I didn't find anyone that I wanted to work with who could help and mold and mentor me into whatever it was I was going to be. So one random day, I find an email that says Steven Palmer writes these kind of books. And he did a lot of the more spiritual books as well. Like he was reading Krishnamurti. And so I thought, okay, he can write a business book, but he's also talking spirituality. This is someone that I think I can start to work with. So we had our first talk. You know, he was kind of a jerk on the first call, right? That's his way. He sort of like pushes everybody away. And if you're still hanging out, then he's like, okay, maybe it's worth keeping in contact.
Yeah.
So we had this kind of relationship, and then it was sort of like we became. I would call Palmer a brother. He's sort of like a brother to me, and we went through some intense shit together. Like, you know, he went through a lot of like separating from his religion and trying to come to grips with who he was, but in a very Steven actually reminds me a lot of you.
The way you're talking,
he does nothing halfway. Like if he's going to experience it, like he was the kind of person who he took a brand and said, I need a ceremonial shift of me moving into my new life. So he got his men's group, and normal men's group would sit around a circle and maybe talk about it. He got the branding iron and he branded himself because he's like, no, I need it. I need the intensity of this moment to be fully. So that's Steven. And he helped me write the book. He's written 30 books himself. He basically took me by the hand and he gave me books. In each book, I said, I hate this book. I hate this book. I hate this book. And then finally sent me a book I liked, which was The Untethered Soul. And when I read that book, I said, okay, there's the book I would have written. So what am I going to do now? And then that kind of led me on the journey with him. I found my voice through that book. And not only The Untethered Soul, he wrote the next book. And I heard that voice in my own head, and I channeled that voice. And that's how I wrote the two books. So Steven really was my mentor, my helper. And then I said, we need to have you on the show. What does he say to me? He says, well, like, I'm like, let's find a topic. And I'm trying to find a topic that maybe will work for him. And he's like, how about dad is a narcissist? And I'm like, really? Like, that's the topic? Like, we're going to get you. And Steven, as I said, is not all that dissimilar from you. So he's ready to own it. He's ready to say, let me go through this journey. Let me share what it was. And he's kind of over people. Like he's not taking anyone else's bullshit. And that's makes it beautiful to be with him. And I'm sure you two will get along just fine. So without further ado, we are welcoming the man, the legend, the myth, Steven Palmer, author of 30 books, New York Times bestseller.
Andy, shut up.
I gotta say, Andy, I'm glad that you find me a joy to be around.
He could go on.
Who I'm sure would say the opposite. And by the way, I'm not the author of 30 books. I only authored a couple of my own. I was a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
In another life.
Yes, and I would say that you wrote the books, so we wouldn't say he authored the books, but he did write them. So
sweet.
Yes, Steven Palmer.
My first impression of you, like seriously, before I got all the introduction, was he seems a little bit shut down.
Just when looking at me.
And then when he started talking about you, I could see your expression in the screen. Like, oh, he's actually smiling. Okay, there's life in there. Let's do it. So welcome to our show, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We see our first comment is from Sean Openuo. Is that how we pronounce his name?
Openui.
Sean, he was a professional NBA player who is friends with Steven, and they've had a great project on basketball, which we won't get into, I guess, but it is a beautiful thing. What's the name of it, just in case people are looking for improving their basketball skills?
Yeah, you can check it out at smartballers.com.
Smartballers.com.
Basketball training.
Basketball training. So, Stephen Palmer, when of all the subjects that I invite you to speak about, how does it come that you say, Andy, let's go for this one? Dad is a narcissist.
Well, when you initially asked me to be on the show, you talked about me leaving my religion, and I wasn't. There was nothing there for me. I wasn't energized by that because that wasn't really my story. Because to me, religion was just another form of the deeper story, which was narcissistic control that I was escaping.
And when we talk about religion, let's get clear that you were in the Mormon church. That was you were raised a Mormon.
Yeah.
You were born Mormon, so that's what you knew, I guess, till now. For me to say I was raised Mormon, there's different brands of Mormon, just like in any religion. Okay.
You're going to get somebody who applies Catholicism differently. One Catholic is going to apply Catholicism differently than another, depending on your psychological makeup. So my brand of Mormonism came from my father primarily, who was a narcissist. So everything was about control.
Wow.
Mind control, essentially.
Wow.
Mind control.
Mind control.
Like, sorry, should I imagine mind control in an activity, like in motion?
I shouldn't say mind control. I don't know about anybody else's experience with narcissism, but from my experience with it was more emotional control.
Emotional. Can you help me? Because let's take one step back. Like, I'd love to know what would be your definition of narcissism, so we all know, and we're all talking about the same thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So here's the funny thing. I use the term all the time, the water in which fish swim. Fish don't notice the water that they're swimming in because it's just their natural state. So as human beings, there's a process of self-awareness that we go through to even discover the water, the unspoken, unwritten expectations and assumptions and perceptions that we have about life that came just from life's programming that we can't even see, let alone question. And so for me, I was raised by a narcissist, but I didn't understand that. It took me literally 43 years to put my finger on. Oh, so I kind of went through phases with it, and you guys can help me unpack this. But the first phase was literally the first 43 years of my life, which was, what the fuck happened to me? Just trying to figure out, I have all of these crazy patterns that I can't stop. I can't figure out. I have these reactive defensive patterns that I felt very trapped in constantly my whole life, still to this day, to a certain extent.
And you associate that strongly with the patterns that your dad sort of superimposed on the family or on you, or how you describe it?
They were reactions to narcissism.
Okay.
But like I say, I use the word narcissism now, but that was the water that I was swimming in that I couldn't put a finger on. And it literally took me interactions with other people, watching how other relationships that I realized I would very easily look at other relationships and say, oh, he's a narcissist, or oh, she's a narcissist. But it took seeing it in other people before I put a finger on, oh, that's what happened to me. My dad.
When you say dad's a narcissist, let me try to create it so it isn't conceptual. Like, I'm kind of trying to get situations in my head so I can make it like really.
Okay, so let me first give my definition of it, and then I'll make it concrete. So my definition of narcissism, and it's a psychological. When I say narcissism, I don't mean, wow, she's a narcissist. She posts selfies all the time. I mean, as a psychological illness, essentially, a diagnosed psychological illness like bipolar or depression. It's narcissism. So I mean it in that very technical sense. So my core kind of bottom line definition of narcissism is selfishly using and controlling others to get what you want with zero regard or feeling for the feelings and needs for others.
It's all about me.
Yes, it's to me. It's essentially, and I don't look at I used to, but I don't look at narcissism on a scale of right or wrong anymore, or good or bad. It's not like, to me, I don't look at narcissists saying as they're morally wrong. I just look at narcissism. Fundamentally, narcissism is control. We're trying to control others and our experience so that we can be okay inside. And it's kind of an arrested development. It's a childhood response. Children are narcissists. You know, I don't know what the child development stage is, but it's like that 2 to 5 year old stage, whatever, where you put children together in a room and one kid has a toy, another kid is going to go grab the toy and say, that's mine. And then doing that as an adult, that's narcissism.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious because there's like this, like there's a boundary. Like we could almost say that everybody is a narcissist to some degree or another, because I have what I want and I know you have what you want. So my job in some ways to influence you possibly to do more of what I want. And that may come at potentially a cost to you.
Yeah. So
to the degree that I'm fully selfless, I would almost always look out for the other's interest as much as if not more than my own. But then you might say that then that person is basically call it a byproduct of their environment, because they're not defining anything at that moment. So when does a bunch
of stuff that you and I could spend hours talking about, Andy. The first of which you said everyone's a narcissist, and that's exactly the bottom line that I've been led to, that I want to unpack with you here.
Yeah.
But to me, it basically comes down to,
we lost him. The quiet pause.
Quickly send him a message.
Yeah, we don't see. Oh, you froze there, so you may be speaking, but we don't hear or see you now. But let's continue on, because I actually basically we've had enough spoken so far that I feel like we can really take this, can continue it further. Basically, what I'm getting from Stephen when we talk about narcissism here, he's really, and I'm going to get into his father relationship, but what I'm hearing from him is that really there was a situation where he was never seen as a child.
Nice. That's a good, I love that you saw that.
So he's not seen as a child, and basically dad has what he wants and wants from him and for him. And it sounds like dad didn't really care what he wanted or he desired.
He wasn't taken into account.
He wasn't taken into account. So in that way, interesting. I don't know why I would have never termed that narcissism, but if we think about it, if I look out for my interests without considering your interests at all, and they might be detrimental to you, then in some ways I'm really a narcissist. I'm only thinking about myself. And I've said, I don't know, you heard me say a lot of times when I'm working with people and they like try to help me and they don't ask any questions about where I am, if it's helpful or anything like that, I often get emotionally triggered. Like, guys, hold on. Like, first question is, do I desire help right now? And so in a weird way, that would be if someone's trying to influence you, and a lot of times, especially if they're selling you something, there is a degree of narcissism there, because they're making the assumption that what they have to offer is more important than how you feel.
My brain can't differentiate manipulation, narcissism.
Yeah. By the way, I just got a message from him. So yeah, Stephen let us know he had internet was lost. So manipulation, let's just say this way. That's a bigger question. Like, what's the difference between manipulation and influence? We're just following up. We haven't waited since you were gone. Basically, my summary was a little bit, when I heard your story, what I was hearing a lot of was that my dad didn't see me as a child. Like, I wasn't seen by him. And not only was I not seen, everything that I didn't do that wasn't in line with his desires was basically pushed down or manipulated to get back to what he needed or wanted from you. That's what I'm taking away from that, your description earlier.
Yes, exactly. And so you'll have to forgive me. I just lost internet, so I'm catching up on your conversation. So I missed some of that. But let me just tie that back to what I originally said, where I said it was mind control, but it was really emotional control. Because and this is a common pattern that I see with all deep diagnosable narcissists, is they hold over you the core. They find what your core human need is, or your core wound. And for me, it was acceptance and belonging. And that was the kind of the carrot that my dad would hold over me. Basically, bottom line is conditional acceptance. I accept and love you and praise you and reward you when you behave like I want you to behave, which is fitting this Mormon mold exactly in this way. You do these things. This is how you live your life. This is how you see the world. And as soon as you stray out of that to a certain degree, well, I'm going to withhold my love and my praise and my acceptance of you. And when that's the thing that you crave the most, you stick around through that abuse, holding on for some shred of hope that you're going to get that core human need. And that's why it's honestly a little bit embarrassing to be 43 years old and still feel under the control of that. But that's how everybody is when you're born into that. When that's the water in which you swim, you come from that from a childhood programming, then that's the program that you're going to have the rest of your life that you have to navigate. But that's what it was for me was, and it was kind of funny, Andy, you kind of said jokingly, but also serious, how I'm done with people. and that's kind of what happened to me was what snapped for me was realizing what snapped for me in both my relationship with my father and with the Mormon church and my ability to just kind of own my life. Honestly, if it comes the moment when you give up hope that you're ever going to get the love and acceptance and you crave from this person. And when that hope finally dies out, it's a tragic day and you grieve and it's scary, but then there's also some liberation and freedom in that, because now you're free to do whatever you want to do, because I'm not trying to, literally, if I were to bottom line, the first 40 years of my life were spent trying to please my father, daddy, and my life.
This is beautiful, because this gets to the core of what we spend a lot of our time talking about when we're together, is when I allow myself to let go of the need or the want in connection to whatever I've attached to, basically the situation completely changes, although nothing might change. It's just my experience of it totally changes. Like I can imagine. So I'm curious today, like when you go to see your father, how is it different now that you've kind of said you've given up on needing or wanting anything from him in terms of an emotional kind of, support or whatever that would have been that you would have needed from him? How is that now?
Well, I can't speak for him.
No, for you.
I think you can relate to this personally. I find that I can connect with him actually a lot easier now. There's no, because there's when you're in the what the fuck happened to me stage that I talked about, and you're trying to figure it out and you're wrapped up in the personalization of it. Look what he did to me. And I could name off stories and things that whatever. And that's that kind of personal, look what he did to me. But when you are able to get deeper perspective and just see him as a human being and see his own struggles and see what led him to create, because I have my own defense mechanisms that I created in response to narcissism, but so does he. My defense mechanisms aren't somehow morally better than his. So it's not like I'm somehow better than him. When you get out of that personal and you see him as a human being, not as my father who did X. Him as a human being with his own struggles. When there's a certain detachment there, the irony is it's easier to connect. So it's not like we're ever going to be close buddies or anything, but for me, there's no issue. I can go, I spend a lot of time with my parents, and there's just not an issue.
It sounds
like, he's completely different person. I still see the same kind of patterns, and we still have hard time kind of connecting. And when I left the church, that was a really big deal for him. And he doesn't talk about it. He just avoids it. But personally, I find it easier to connect with him.
Yeah.
I don't blame him anymore.
Yeah. I was going to say, it sounds not all that dissimilar, obviously, from the story of my dad, because once I no longer treated him or expected him to be dad, I didn't hold him accountable for what I needed from him and blame him when he didn't give it to me. it shifted immediately. Like everything shifted in regards to our relationship.
Yeah.
Right. The arguments turned into him kind of crying at the fact that he finally felt seen and heard and all of that. Right. But I think that's a really hard. I don't know if many people even get there with their fathers, because in order to get there, you actually have to see through the fact that you yourself are blaming them for the thing that you need from them, as if they are responsible for that. You hold them responsible for something that you need, but you're not aware of. So it's a big step.
And not only that, I'm doing the exact same thing as him. He's using whatever tools that he uses to get me to behave how he wants me to behave, so that he can feel okay inside. But so am I. My whole life, I'm trying to get him to change so that I can be okay with our relationship, versus me just loving him as he is. So I'm being a hypocrite where I'm not accepting him just as he is, but I'm wanting him to accept me just as I am.
Yeah. So you're a narcissist.
Absolutely. So here are my big picture phases, Andy, and I'll let you go into whatever, unpack this however you want. But my big picture phases were first 43 years of my life. What the fuck happened to me? And deep, intense personal inner work, trying to figure out why I have the patterns that I do. Why do I interact with people the way that I do? Where do these emotional triggers come from that I can't control? Then it was the clicking and viewing other people's relationships. Oh, my dad's a narcissist. That was the simple explanation. It was just this. It was just constant control, control, control. And I had to learn how to break free from that and live my own life. So second phase was, oh, that's what he was. That's what happened. Third phase was, and this was kind of the deeper, darker, more confronting personal phase is, and guess what? So am I. I'm a fucking narcissist. Like deep, like not any better than him. I'm a straight up fucking narcissist, and I could go on and on. Now, my narcissism didn't necessarily look like his, but it's just different forms of the same thing. So that was the next phase. I'm a fucking narcissist. But then the deeper phase that I'm moving into now is, it's not a personal thing. It's not he was a narcissist, I'm a narcissist, she's a narcissist. It's everybody's a narcissist, but at the deepest level, the human mind is a narcissist. The human mind is built for control. Everything is about control. So everything we're doing as human beings is trying to control experience. We're trying to control other people out there and everything out there so that we can feel okay inside, so that we can get what we want. And there's just varying degrees and levels and manifestations of that. And there's people who are very abusive and toxic in that. And then there are people who look very successful and admirable that everybody wants to look up to, but they just have different forms and manifestations of this, trying to control everything in our experience so that we can be okay. And when you realize that, then it becomes completely impersonal. It's not any narcissist doing anything to me. It's just looking at me and me as a human being, and the human condition is narcissism. It's control. And so for me, what I've really come to realize is, I used to think that the opposite of narcissism was empathy. That when you look at diagnosable narcissists, what they lack is empathy. Either they can't or they shut off their mechanisms. They refuse to see how my actions are affecting other people. They just barrel through life, taking, grabbing like little children, and just shoving people around and pissing people off and hurting people. And they don't care. They somehow lack that feeling, that empathic feeling. And that's what I used to think. It was narcissism versus empathy. But I don't view it that way anymore. To me, the opposite of narcissism isn't empathy. It's surrender. When you define narcissism as control, its opposite is an empathy, because we can be very empathic. I consider myself
slow down a bit.
Empath.
You're got like so much wisdom compact in these moments that I kind of want to let them breathe. Like you said that assuming your definition of narcissism is the need and desire to control at the cost of another, that the opposite of narcissism would be surrender. That's
So
powerful.
if you define narcissism as essentially just control, and then you view it in more general terms, not as in more existential terms versus psychological terms,
Yeah.
then you and I say this because I consider myself to be an empath. Andy, I know you're a very deep empath. My wife is an empath. I have friends who are empaths. And even as an empath, I was an M in my manifestation, a total narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be empathic and be a narcissist all day long.
And because you're controlling your environment at the cost of the people around you. That goes by your definition, if I'm correct there. Yeah.
And not only the cost of other people around me, it's the cost of my own happiness. So
Sure.
so the bottom line kind of equation for me is, again, I don't look. We define narcissism as control, but I don't look at that as good or bad, right or wrong. My dad did me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's only in terms of happiness or suffering that we suffer to the degree that we're narcissists. Narcissism equals suffering, and to the degree to which we can surrender control is the degree to which we can be happy. That's kind of the bottom line equation for me. It's about suffering versus happiness. And if we can learn to surrender and let go of that narcissistic control that the human mind latches onto, then we find happiness in any circumstance. Now, by no means am I there. That's just kind of like the.
I mean, you've got 42. You've got 42 years. And I don't know, Bambos, if you're aware, but the Mormon Church is really quite strict.
I want to slow down a bit.
Yeah, please.
Like, I'm not even sure if it's appropriate, but I'm just feeling so much right now. Like I had tears in my eyes, and I was trying to. It feels suffocating being you when you were little. I literally felt choked. So, and I felt so much pain in my chest and my throat that I felt for vomiting or something. And then I'm witnessing you here, and you're talking with this voice, and it's really loud and ferocious, and it feels like it's the tone of your voice, even like enough.
Yeah, I hit a lot of those moments in a very personal way, like, enough, I'm not going to deal with this bullshit anymore, but also in a outwardly directed sense, enough, I'm done putting up with abuse. I can own my boundaries. That's the other way out of narcissism. This is connecting back to, I said that you give up on those relationships and you find freedom when you give up hope that you're going to find what you're wanting from this person. But deeper than that, you let go of the need for that when you find it within yourself. When you find the love and acceptance and belonging within yourself that you've been craving your whole life, then you no longer need it from other people. And that's when you find that liberation too. So yeah, absolutely. I went through a lot of phases. I went through the anger phase, the outwardly directed, look what you did to me phase, then to the inwardly directed of, look how I'm a narcissist. Look what I'm doing. Enough of this bullshit. Like, just the whole secret is learning to let go of control. It's just all bullshit. Control is just bullshit, but that's how we're built.
And I would suggest what I mentioned earlier, the Mormon Church has so much control. It goes way, way beyond just dad. Dad was in the system of control. The whole thing is control. You know, you telling me that you're leaving the church, you leave the church basically in the Mormon Church. Once he leaves the church, he's signed out of the book, which means after everyone's dead, his family can't visit him.
Well, we can get into stupid, deep. Mormon
No, but I don't want to. But hold on,
They can be in the lower kingdom. They're in the upper kingdom with God, and I'm in the lower kingdom, and they can come visit me, but I can't come visit them.
Is that right? Oh, I didn't know that. But I just wanted to give Bambos just some context here, because Bambos doesn't have this familiarity. That's the level of. Imagine the emotional torment you have, because every time the parents see them, like, yeah, we're not going to be able to see you in the afterlife. Like, that's the level of control. It's insane.
Yeah, and again, at its root, and to me, personally, this is inflammatory. I don't mean to be. It's just a personal view that I've come to from my own experience. Is as I view it, religion was an evolved biological mechanism for the human mind to deal with when we evolved the ability to think about thinking. That's when everything went downhill for the human mind. Animals just kind of live their lives and they don't think about stuff. Well, we think about stuff, and that thinking creates all these problems. So we had to have mechanisms for managing that existential darkness that we fell into, and religion is one of those ways, and a lot of people find a lot of comfort in it, and that's cool. But for me, Mormonism is a cult, and here's how the bottom line way of how I know that from personal experience is, you're in a cult by how people in the cult treat you after you leave. If you're in just kind of a general basic mainstream religion, if you're Catholic and kind of you go to church Christmas and Easter and that's how you were raised, and you stop being Catholic, your Catholic friends don't raise their eyebrows and be like, oh my gosh, you're being deceived by Satan. In my upbringing, literally the way that I am viewed by most people that I grew up with now is, I'm deceived by Satan. I'm wandering in mists of darkness. I'm basically not going to go to heaven. I'm not going to be together forever with my family. I'm not going to get all of these things. And so to me, the construct of that is fundamentally, and I'm not looking, just like I'm not looking at my dad as the culprit of narcissism. So if there's any Mormons watching this, I'm not blaming Mormonism for doing this. To me, it's a product of the human mind.
Yeah.
And we need it to a certain degree at certain levels of existence to even survive, because we can't stand to stare at the uncertainty
at the abyss.
Yeah. So it's kind of this ironic thing where religion is supposed to be based on faith, and yet religion is not based on faith. Religion is based on I know. It's based on belief, which is in my opinion, completely different than belief. We cannot abide with not knowing, so we cling to beliefs to say, I know this is true, and that gives us a sense of existential comfort.
Steve, sorry. Like, I've been holding a curiosity about you when you were little. Like, what was it like being you? What was it like being your body in relation to the church or your father? Because it feels like the whole construction that you were raised in was narcissistic.
The easiest way I can describe it, Bombos, is it was a complete and utter nonstop state of confusion.
Fuck.
More so than hurt, it was confusion. It was I use the term cognitive dissonance all the time to describe my experience. Cognitive dissonance being this, it's really the feeling that we get when we have a discrepancy between behavior and beliefs, and we feel it in our own behavior, but we also experience with other people. When somebody says one thing but does another, it creates this confusing cognitive dissonance, this fuzz in our brains that we don't know how to deal with. So when you're growing up with a person that you're absolutely terrified of, who's constantly telling you, I love you, what the fuck do you do with that? It's like, what do you mean you love me? So you're a child, though. You can't, I'm 43 years old. I can work through this stuff. But when you're a 2-year-old child or a 5-year-old child, and you got a guy whacking you as hard as he can with a leather belt, and then afterwards say, I love you, it's like, huh. It was a depression. I suffered from very deep depression for most of my life, but looking back now, that depression was confusion. I didn't know how to make sense of anything. I'm number 11 of 13 kids, so it was kind of a whole family. In my opinion, this kind of goes into deep psychology, and it's here, and it was my story, but in my opinion, my dad had 13 kids, so that he had to have 13 kids to control. So I'm 13, or I'm number 11 of 13. So it's not just my dad; it's a whole kind of family culture where everybody's hurting, everybody's bickering, it's nonstop conflict. And it would be like here's cognitive dissonance. My dad was a rageaholic, and I'll make this really concrete for you, Bombos. There's a church in the Mormon church. There's a program called primary. It's what you go when you go to church on Sundays. The kids go to primary, and you sing songs, and you go to teachers teach you and stuff. So one of the primary songs that we would sing was, "I'm so glad when Daddy comes home, glad as I can be," and talks about jumping up on his knee and giving him a big hug. And I literally remember being like 6, 7, 8 years old, singing this song, and I wouldn't sing it. I'd look around going, really? Like, is this for real? Like, because when my dad came, you ran. We would literally watch out I don't know about my siblings, but I would watch out the window. He'd come home, he'd be gone, leave early in the morning before we got up, and then he'd come home late in the afternoon, and you'd watch out the window for him so that you could make yourself scarce. And so I'm living with this constant cognitive dissonance of all these conflicting messages, and you just don't know how to make sense of it. So it's hurtful. It's emotionally hurtful, yes, but it's just it's a mind fuck. I don't know how else to say it other than it's a mind fuck.
And as a child, you probably didn't know that you had a choice, or like you didn't know that there was another way of being. That was your way of being.
It took me 43 years to do this. I should have done that when I was 2.
Yeah.
How like in life, well, at least in my life, and I also in Andy's, and I'm pretty sure in your life too, how did you use that pain? What did that pain drive you to become in your life?
So, Bombos, one of the things that you have brought out really well, just in the way that you're interacting with me, is you notice how the way that I talk, Bombos, is the way I'm describing this is very intellectual, right? And you keep bringing me back into the feeling of the body. So even now you see this pattern. What I did, Bombos, as a kid was, to me, because I'm such a deep empathic feeler, I'm a deep empathic feeler with a rageaholic, abusive narcissist with zero empath whatsoever, or empathy whatsoever, or at least that he's cluing into. I basically shut off my heart. The equation for me was subconsciously as a child, everything below the neck is messy and painful, and everything above the neck is clean and safe. So I essentially went into my head to escape the confusion and the hurt in the heart. So the way that I approach things, as you're seeing in this, the way my brain works is I find the mental model that then I can kind of breathe and live into and ground into first, which is not necessarily a good or bad thing. That's just how my brain works. So that's a long answer to your question. That's how I dealt with it, is I tried at least to cut off all heart and just live from the head, which had a whole host of consequences. It made me a narcissistic prick. It makes me disconnect from my empathy in relation to myself, in relationship to other people. It's not you have this heart-to-heart connection with me immediately, where I'm sitting here in my head not connecting, right? So I've had to learn to feel safe. I've had to take Andy's journey to a certain extent. Andy and I share kind of similar journeys. I think a lot of the same kind of some parallels, and I've had to slowly learn how to move from head to heart and be safe in that space. But like I said earlier, it starts with being safe within yourself in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my last question was more directed to using the pain like a little what Andy did with the wounded warrior,
Healer.
the healer.
I'm not warrior, man.
Wounded healer, that he took the pain and he found love, let's say. So did you use the pain for any creative purposes, or like did it manifest in ways where you impacted others, like, or are you still on that edge of discovery?
I would say that my single greatest success in life, success meaning in terms of me getting what I wanted, the biggest thing for me that I desperately craved growing up was connection. I very easily could have dealt with the physical aspects of my dad's rage and all of that had I felt a sense of connection in that. Right? It wasn't the physical issues that's not the problem. It's the emotional connection. So I craved emotional connection so deeply that what I did with that was what I wanted more than anything was a close couple relationship and a close family. So pretty much anything I've done in business has failed. But I have a really good family and a really good marriage that gives me the connection that I crave so much. So I basically turned that into consciously creating the family and the connection and the belonging that I crave so much. And if there's anything that I have done well, I think it's that connection with my own family. Yeah. I'm not so good at connecting with people outside of my family, but in my family, I think I'm a good connector.
I'm in a select group with him.
And so now you have a family, you have a wife and a child?
4 kids. Yeah, we have 4 kids. We have
4.
And yeah, so we have a 20-year-old son. Well, technically we have 5 kids now because my 20-year-old son, he's not married yet, but he has a girlfriend and she's my daughter. I claim her as my daughter, whether she likes it or not. So we've got our 20-year-old who's with his girlfriend and they have a baby. And then we have 3 daughters, 14, 12, and 10.
Okay. So earlier you claimed that I am a narcissist, right? And you were like, it's also a part of me. Do you sometimes in relationship with your kids or your wife, do you see that part of yourself coming out? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Oh, nonstop, constantly, every day. And to me, the real bottom line, what I've tried to do, there's a book by there's a researcher by the name of John Gottman. He's a marriage researcher, and based on research, he can sit down with any couple, and within 15 minutes, he can accurately predict with a 97% accuracy whether or not you'll still be together within 10 years. Just 15 minutes of observing interactions. And he's got all this research, and I could go through all the research, but the bottom line comes down to, he says there's this ratio, it's the magic ratio. And he says it's 5-to-1. So for every one negative interaction you have in a relationship, if you have 5 positive interactions, that relationship is going to be solid and just fine. And so that's what it boils down to for me, is always understanding what me and my wife call that emotional, and we talk about it with our kids all the time, this emotional bank account, where in relationships we have emotional bank account where we're always kind of giving and taking from each other, but it's how is that full in the balance? And it comes from that magic ratio of 5-to-1. So I fuck up constantly with my kids. I have the exact same patterns as my dad, not to the same degree. I've never physically abused my kids ever, never laid a finger on them, but certainly yell at them, speak harshly to them like any father. But I just try to make up for it, I guess, however way I can, by the magic ratio, the positive interactions, and a lot of apologies. I never, to this day, I've never really gotten an apology, and it won't come, because narcissists literally, they shut off their ability to see what they're doing to other people, so they really can't apologize, because they honestly they don't connect with it. They don't see what's happening. So they don't even have. So I try very conscious about apologies. We back?
Yeah, we're back. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to be very conscious about apologies, because that's one thing that you'll never hear from a narcissist. I'm sorry. Just simple. I'm
Well,
sorry.
you might hear it. I'm sorry you feel
No,
that.
no, no. Here's what
I'm
you'll
sorry
hear.
you feel that way.
Sorry you made me do this to you.
Yeah, but slow down here. Slow down. Okay, listen. So what you're saying to me is you read a book. So it's 1 to 5. So you can easily. It sounds like you're not embodying it, but you're intellectually okay. I've done this, so I need to make up for it 4 times.
No, that's not the experience. That was me just using that book tool as a way to describe how I deal with my narcissism with my
But
family.
like, let's get like, we're talking of narcissists. I don't know if I've ever been to a more like well-adjusted family. Like when I'm in their family, like there's such a calm and a sort of love and like kind of everyone's holding space for each other. There's no, the dissension you'd have is not like dysfunctional of anything.
Oh, and I also didn't get that.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure, like when I look at your family, it's more idyllic than anything else. I mean, I've been thinking, wow, this is actually gives me the desire to potentially have a family. I've been in so many other family scenarios that I've said like, wow, I'm so happy that is in my life. But when I'm with you, there's certainly this feeling like, wow, there's a beauty going on here. So there's something special in how you've kind of cultivated what you were missing in your life in the family unit I now experience.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, Andy, and that observation. For me, with me and my wife, and within our family with our kids, our North Star has always been one thing: connection. And with that, when that becomes your North Star, you're constantly on the search for what it disturbs this connection or what disconnects us, and you're always trying to fix that. So everybody's a narcissist. I'm a narcissist. I can sit and bitch and moan all day long and tell you stories all day long about my poor little childhood, but whatever. I'm a narcissist too. It really just comes down to can we apologize and say I'm sorry, and can we be aware of how we're impacting others? Can we take responsibility for that, and then can we try to move forward and repair that?
And can you also forgive yourself in that moment? Or we've done that. Can you also be gentle with yourself in that moment?
Nice.
Not forgive.
I like your clarification, because immediately what I was going to say is I can forgive myself in the same way that I can forgive others. When you see yourself and see others, you see that there's nothing ever to forgive. When I see my dad,
but don't go there. Don't go there. He asked you the other question.
Concept.
We don't want you in your head. Get out of your head. He said, could you repeat that beautiful question you gave him, Bambos?
Go ahead.
Can you be gentle with yourself in those moments?
I can now.
Okay.
I've learned to be. It took a long, long time. Because
slow down. What does that look like? What does gentle look like? How does it actually play out inside you?
Here's how self-compassion finally clicked for me. You look at yourself in the same way that you would look at a 5-year-old kid. If you were to look at a 5-year-old kid, not you, and see him in, he's been hurt by somebody, and he's crying and he's torn up. What would your natural response be to that 5-year-old kid? Would it be, stop crying, shut up, you whiny little bitch? Or would it be to get on your knees and hug him and say, it's going to be okay. You're okay. You're safe. I see you. I feel you. I hear you. And when it's so funny, because I bring up those two voices because that first voice was the first 40 years of my life to myself. Suck it up, you whiny little bitch. Get over it already. Which, of course, where does that voice come from? We all have that inner critic, and it comes from the strongest influences in our life. That voice wasn't my voice. It was my father's voice that I owned So in a lot of ways, it's like I can blame my dad all I want for this lack of acceptance and belonging, but I'm the one who did it in my head when I took on his voice. Mm. So when I can learn to see the inner child in me objectively, I get down on my knees and say, hey, it's okay.
Where did you learn that?
For 40 years, I was stuck in the inner critic that I took on from my dad of just constantly beating myself up. So you have these patterns that you develop from narcissistic control that then you act out, and then your inner critic comes back and says, you're such an idiot. You're such a fucking idiot. You screw up all the time, constantly. You're never going to get this right. I go on. Everybody has. I can go on and on about my inner voice.
Please don't go on and on. Steve, where did like? Okay, we have your father. So, is there a person in your life that you would say showed you that? I mean, you can read about it and you can intellectualize about how to be gentle with yourself, but did you meet anyone in your life that inspired you to and embodied that way of being?
There have been two people in my life only who have really, in my opinion, modeled self-compassion in a way that worked for me. And that's Andy Chaliff and another client, an old client of mine, Michael Bunting, who's a mindfulness teacher in Australia.
Nice. And like, I'm talking close to myself because a lot of your story is similar to mine. So raising children, I mean, raising a child and not having a reference as to how to be a father because you just don't have that reference. I can imagine you had to rewire yourself, or you're learning to rewire yourself. So to what degree did your wife support you, or like
that has not been my experience, Bambo. I mean, look, I still have the similar patterns that I've acted out, but honestly, this is not a criticism. It's just the way that I'm built. I personally don't understand when people grow up in a really abusive experience and then go and perpetuate that on their own children. Not that I'm blaming or judging them. I just simply, in a practical sense, don't understand it. Only because that's not how I'm built. So for me, I felt very prepared for fatherhood because I wanted a family basically to give my kids everything I didn't have. So for me, what guided me was the absence of the love and the connection and the acceptance.
But Bambos was getting at, I don't know, it didn't seem like the question was met, was how did you rewire your brain so that was a different mode of operating?
And that's what I'm trying to say is I didn't rewire my brain. He was basically saying, you were raised this way, and then how did you rewire yourself to be a better father? And I'm saying I didn't rewire. That's how I was built. I didn't understand how you could treat another human being like that.
Oh, okay. From a young age.
Oh, it was more because you said earlier that so as a child, we don't see that there's another way of being. So how did you discover that other way of being?
I mean, I saw it. I would see it modeled, but it was just an intuitive sense. I don't know.
I was going to say, the thought that came to mind was I trusted myself. Would that be fair to say?
Somewhere deep down under that inner critic, I did have some kind of intuitive sense of how I wanted my family to be.
By the way, there are tons of comments coming in, but they're not coming in on our wall. They're coming in on the private post that we're doing on my own page. Karina's all over you. She says, I'm the luckiest woman in the world. And there's a lot of people, emotional connection is all that matters. You're the best man I've ever had sex with. No, she didn't say. Sorry.
That's the Andy I know and love.
Yeah, and we have a lot of people really really speaking to the strong boundaries with narcissists, with where we're oil and water, it's an incapacity and I don't trust them. So basically, there's a lot of people speaking to that topic. Yeah. And
yeah, and I don't I would never presume to give anybody advice in their own situation because everyone has their own experience. My experience with boundaries with narcissists, it came for me in a few different stages and forms and ways that I applied it. The first phase is personal blame and anger. Fuck you. Get the fuck out of my life. You don't get me anymore. It's very defensive. It's reactive. It's personal. It's immature. But it's also necessary. It's also a very vital, healthy stage of psychological development, especially when you've had childhood trauma that stifled that development, that normal, healthy development that allowed you to be independent. There's this whole kind of normal phases that humans go through. And one of those is when you become a teenager, you start growing, you become independent. Well, when that process gets stifled, then as an adult, you kind of have to live through that. And it like a prick. so you go through that defensive, angry, fuck you phase, which is very necessary and healthy and cool. But then eventually you just settle out of that when you stop the blame and you get the deeper insights. And eventually you realize you're absolutely, like for me, if I find somebody's a narcissist, they get nothing of me, absolutely nothing. I will block them from my texts. I will block them from my emails. I will block them. They get no, if you are a narcissist, you're out of my life. But that's not because I blame you or judge you or think you're an evil human being. It's simply because I love myself and I know my space that I can hold space for, and I can't hold space for that. And you go exploit other people because you sure as fuck ain't exploiting me.
It sounds like I can imagine it can also be reactive, but when I hear you, it really feels like I'm saying no to that behavior.
I'm saying yes to myself.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Yeah.
But see, here's the trick, though. That becomes its own sense of narcissism, too, because then you go around saying, well, I'm only going to allow the people in my life who lift and up support me. Well, that's just being a fucking narcissistic child, too. Yeah. So there's just levels of narcissism, but eventually you do have, with narcissists, in my opinion, they're just toxic takers, and you have to just starve them. The only way, in my experience, to do it. And that means starving them in your head too. That's a big thing that I've realized is I go around saying, fuck you to narcissists all the time, but guess who's what? I'm giving them energy.
Yeah.
Every time I react to a narcissist and get pissed off and then have discussions with my wife about it, and we go over and over, look what this person did. Well, I'm giving them energy.
Yeah.
So me and my wife are slowly but surely learning you starve them. And that means not just starving them in terms of the attention you give them, but in the physical world, but the mental space you give them. Move on. Stop holding on to it and just move on. Let it go. Let them live. So it's a very healthy boundary. It's not this fuck you. It's just a no, I know my space. I know myself. I see that behavior clearly. Cool. Move on. And I'm not going to think about it anymore either. I'm not going to give more mental space.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. I've been part of that journey with you. And Bambos mentioned in a question, it was the second part of that question he asked earlier, was that how has your wife been there for you? And I've been on the phone with your wife. So, I mean, she's been on the, like, let him have the dark night of the soul, which is certainly where you went. And she didn't, know how to hold space for you because you just needed space. So yeah, he got a lot of support in the way that he was allowed to go through the journey and figure out how he was going to evolve from it. And he needed that space and he took it, right? Yeah. So
my wife, Karina, has been my savior, my angel. I would never have been able to do it without her. She is, in fact, I have a tattoo on my side for her, but she, what Karina did for me was just hold space for me. What I always needed as an empath, I had very strong emotions that were always, so whenever something would happen in my family, there'd be a frustration. My dad would abuse us. And then when we would express any anger or frustration about it, then we were always in the wrong. It was because we weren't seeing things clearly. So we could never have a connective where I could just express my feelings and they would just listen. I feel your feelings. It's okay to feel this way. So as a very strong feeler and having those bottled up, all I ever needed was somebody to just say, it's okay to feel this way. And that's what Karina has done for me, is just held space for me in my darkest, wildest emotional outbursts and said, it's okay to feel this way.
Yeah.
I think when you talked about your wife just a moment ago, and you mentioned about the tattoo, I think that was the first moment I felt you drop into your heart in a really gentle way. And then you went into your head, you start talking again. Like, and I just wanted to experience you, like just being there for just a moment, like just to feel how much you, like, I just felt how much you loved her. It was really like, wow. Even from this,
She's
even
my
from this
wife.
video.
Yeah. When we met, basically, I don't know, was it you were reading like a new book a day sort of thing when we were together, when we were first starting to interact? I don't know. He was a carnivore of books. So basically, as I spoke to him, that we had this human funny language where I would speak and he'd say, yeah, you're referencing A, B, C, D, and E, and F, but you never talk about, and he'd say, did you read this book? And I said, no, I haven't read that book. And so he's like, so when he was editing, he's like, the hardest thing with editing with you is that basically you're living the things that are already written about, but I can't use the terms that were written about. So as we work together, his conundrum was, how do I make it so that it stays true to like you not reading, you not trying to like justify, explain, use third-party credibility so that other people think that you might have some authority through another figure of some sort. So it was really beautiful because in that way I see in Stephen the journey that we've been on together, there's very much this aspect of him sort of not even reading it, but saying, oh, this is what now I come to the understanding in myself. So I embody it more, right? It's not an intellectualization of an idea. It's me knowing it in myself, right? Which has been a beautiful journey to make together. Yeah.
I had a mentor over a decade ago tell me, Steve, you're the most overread and underdone person I've ever met. And he could not have been more spot on. And as you know well, Andy, I'm in my office and I'm looking at a wall of bookshelves that used to be full of books.
Yeah,
I hit a point. I have not read a book. It's going on 2 years. I can't read anymore. I'm done.
Wow.
I've systematically been purging all my books. I gave a bunch away to friends. I don't read anymore. These books behind me are ones that where are they? You can't see them. Ones I did for clients, but I just.
Do you remember how like you were baffled, like when I explained to you that I don't read books because I'm having a hard enough time trying to stay connected, and then when I'm reading, it's taking me out of my connection. I'm having to think think about somebody else's stuff instead of my own. It's nice to like come full circle back with you and laugh at that. Yeah.
No, I can't read anymore because I read so much for two reasons. One, because like I said, to deal with pain, I moved into my head, and two, I didn't trust myself. So I'm always looking outside for answers.
Yep. Beautiful. We've gone over our hour, which is just fine, but it does mean that we should be bringing our time to a close. It was beautiful to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.
Stephen is done the editing for The Wounded Healer. So his work will also be, he's the quiet, I would say the victor, and however people connect with my work, it's because we connect and you help me make sure that I don't, I stay connected to my own emotions, even though you might not talk the way that you, that is connected per se, you sure as hell make sure that the writing is connected. That like the back of your hand, intellectually, it's very clear to you.
You're the one who brings the connection to the writing.
Well, you know it.
You speak from experience and I just edit your stuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, and just really quickly, Andy, while I was thanking my wife, but Andy, to close out here, I really want to thank you. You've been, top 3 most influential, most important people in my life. You, more than anyone, helped me move from head to heart, and it's still a work in progress. But honestly, you've been really, really instrumental in moving from head to heart and finding the safe space within the heart. So I want to acknowledge and thank you for that, Andy.
Thank you. It was a journey we took together, right? Yeah.
Still not.
And never. It's exactly. We're on the same. We just continue the journey forward. I love you. We'll talk later. Yeah.
Take care, Steve.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank you. That was a beautiful session. Yeah, that's Stephen. Yeah,
Stephen.
Yeah.
There was a moment that I felt I just wanted to cry.
Yeah,
and it's happened before in the show, and I hold it till the end.
Uh-huh.
But it felt like, oh, it shifted into something else.
Yeah. I loved it because you saw me step back
Yeah.
and just let you start to own it. Because what I saw was sometimes when we'll have guests on, some guests will drop in with you.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, hey, I can go home. And if they don't, then I'm sort of easier with the banter. Like I can keep the discussion going and like keep the flow until we find this topic that maybe connects. But if they're gonna dig with us, then hey, you did.
Yeah. I mean, you saw me in the beginning. Like I was quiet because I was really feeling all these emotions and I didn't want to impose them.
Yeah.
So I had to really like connect and allow them to be there and then meet him.
Yeah. I love it when you did it. I know I love it when I sit there and say, oh, where are we going to go now? Oh, where are we going to where are we going to go now?
But wow, man, I really enjoyed him.
Yeah. Beautiful man, isn't he? I mean, he's certainly brought great joy to my life. Let's discuss quickly. We have normally we do Monday to Friday, but this Sunday we have at 8 p.m. Central European time, we have Matthew Schwartz. Matthew Schwartz is an incredible, I know I'm pronouncing the name pathetically, but Matthew is an incredible individual. He's done over 10,000 news stories, basically just figuring out where people are scamming each other. So he's that guy that we all know on TV who goes and shoves a microphone in someone's mouth and says, you've just scammed them of millions of dollars. And then, and you know, he's
still alive.
And he's still alive. And he's even interviewed like the Son of Sam murderer, you know, the serial killer. So go to so he's a known entity on national TV in the US. And he basically wrote a book and we got in contact through that. And I asked him if he'd like to be on. The book comes out, I think, in the next few days. And he's going to be on Sunday. So we have him on Sunday at 8 p.m. We're going to discuss his book, discuss the life of somebody who's shoving microphones in people's mouth. It should be very, very cool.
Yeah. So join us Sunday on a wonderful chaos, guys.
And one more thing, please do us a favor. We've almost reached 500. We've almost reached 500 followers. And that's in, say, a month period. We'd love to get the numbers up so we can reach more people. And if there's more people, then other people come on because they'd say that must be something interesting. So please like and follow us or do whatever you're going to do. Thank you for joining us on A Wonderful Chaos.
Adios.
Adios.